Yuta is one of the most important characters in Jujutsu Kaisen and the protagonist of the prequel film Jujutsu Kaisen O. Prior to the events of the manga and the anime, Gege Akutami wanted to have Yuta as his protagonist in the main story as well, with JJKO being written and published before the manga with Yuji as the main character. Either way, Akutami went on to incorporate Yuta as a critical character in his main series. He is one of the 4 special grade sorcerers, alongside Gojo Satoru, Gero Suguru, and Yuki Tsukumo, with Gojo being sliced in half following the battle with Sukuna. It is Yuta and Yuji's turn to battle the King of Curses and take him down while saving Megumi in the process, who's being used as Sukuna's vessel. We've also finally seen the light, with Yuta's domain expansion being shown off in all its glory. So, today's video is dedicated to Yuta Okkotsu and his extraordinary anatomy that allows him to be a potential successor to Gojo Satoru, the man who alone was the honored one throughout heaven and earth. Who is Yuta Okkotsu? Why is his lineage important? In the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, the best sorcerers are generally the best because they were born to be the best. Gojo Satoru had to be born with Limitless and the 6 eyes to be Gojo Satoru. Similarly, Yuta was born with bloodline buffs that led to him being a special grade sorcerer from the very beginning. This brings us to his lineage, with Yuta being a descendant of Mishizane Sugawara, who was one of the big 3 vengeful spirits in Japan and also happens to be an ancestor to Gojo Satoru and the Gojo clan as a whole. People born to the 3 main clans, namely Gojo, Kamo, and Zenin, have a higher natural aptitude for jujutsu with overpowered techniques and an excess of cursed energy, at least when compared to the average sorcerer. The bloodline here determines the ceiling for the sorcerer. Like Gojo, Yuta was born with a massive reserve of cursed energy due to being a descendant of Sugawara. How did Yuta manifest his powers? How did he retain them? Most jujutsu sorcerers start to manifest their cursed energies and techniques around the age of 5 to 6. However, this manifestation was delayed in Yuta's case because he grew up living a normal life, detached from the world of jujutsu. He was close to Rika Orimoto, whom he used to play with at a park. Call it puppy love, but Rika wanted to get married to Yuta, which led to her giving him a ring. Although Yuta's love for Rika was not as overtly shown as it was from her end, he loved her nonetheless, which was made evident by their promise to marry one another. Things went south when Yuta witnessed Rika get hit by a car. Her skull was crushed and there was no chance of saving her. Everything happened too fast, and when a person experiences something traumatic, the first stage of grief tends to be denial. Before Yuta could accept her death and grieve over it, he could not bring himself to accept the fact that she was no more. He looked at her dead body with the ring on her finger and was in a state of shock. At that moment, he unknowingly cursed her, turning her into a cursed spirit. This led to him suddenly feeling a pull around his legs, and he looked down to see the curse grabbing at him, telling him that it would marry him. Curses in Jujutsu Kaisen are born as a result of negative emotions that seep out of humans in the form of cursed energy. Unlike sorcerers, however, the average human has a very minimal reserve of cursed energy, so most cursed spirits represent a human emotion that is widely felt by many people. Mahito, for example, is born from human hate. Hanami is a representation of humanity's fear of natural disasters. Jujutsu sorcerers often monitor hospitals and schools because these are the 2 places where humans widely feel a plethora of negative emotions depending on their personal experiences. However, Yuta's case is unique due to 2 reasons. Firstly, the cursed spirit Rika is born from the negative emotions of one individual, and she is a special grade from the get-go, which proves just how much cursed energy Yuta has. Secondly, while emotions such as hatred and fear are negative, love is generally depicted in a positive light. However, there is no feeling in the world that can evoke as much malevolence as love, since love makes people do things normally beyond their imagination. It can make a perfectly reasonable person extremely violent, making them do things that they would never have normally done. Hatred is an easier emotion to deal with than lost love, which is why Yuta's emotions that were born out of his love for Rika were negative in nature, as he had lost the one he loved and promised to marry. It was this love that prevented Rika from leaving the physical world and passing on. Rika's cursed spirit latched onto Yuta and killed anyone who meant harm to him. This led to Yuta's life getting worse, as it would brutally kill Yuta's bullies in front of his eyes. In due time, the Jujutsu world got wind of this and planned to execute Yuta, until Gojo Satoru decided to save him due to his desire for a student who could surpass him or at least match him in strength someday. Naturally, he joined Jujutsu High as a special grade sorcerer. Around this point, however, Yuta was strong due to Rika's curse being a special grade, so much so that Gero Suguru referred to her as the Queen of Curses and wished to add her to his arsenal of cursed spirits. On the other hand, Yuta himself had to learn how to fight, which led to him training in hand-to-hand combat combat and with weapons under Maki Zenin. Rika's presence provided Yuta with boundless cursed energy and led to him manifesting his own technique of mimicry, allowing him to copy the cursed techniques of other sorcerers and curses. This is why we saw him using cursed speech like Toge Inumaki during his fight against Geto in JJKO. Near the ending of the film, however, Gojo revealed how Rika was not a cursed spirit that lashed onto Yuta, but Yuta was the one who cursed Rika as he couldn't accept her death, turning her into the monster that stuck to him. Rika was so strong because Yuta was a descendant of Michizane Sugawara, and due to him inherently possessing massive levels of cursed energy. When he had begun to work in tandem with her in battles, he had limitations on the amount of cursed energy he could access from her, which he used to amplify his strength and speed despite originally having a smaller build and weaker body. However, after Geto used cursed spirit manipulation, Supreme Art Uzumaki, and unleashed a maelstrom of cursed spirits during the climax of their one-on-one battle, Yuta broke the limits of how much cursed energy he could take on from Rika. To do this, he made a deal to sacrifice himself with her and for her, confessing his love to her and asking for her protection one last time. This implied that he had finally allowed himself to accept the fact that she was no more and was willing to allow her to pass on from the physical world to the afterlife, albeit with him in tow. As a result, Yuta won the battle, but he also survived. He had placed the bond on her when he refused to accept her death, and after the sacrificial statement, he had broken that very bond and would not have to suffer for it unless Rika wanted him to pay a penalty. But she loved him, so she thanked him for letting her stay by his side a bit longer before she passed on. Previously, it was believed that Rika had cursed her before Yuta's lineage was revealed, but because it was Yuta who had cursed her, he could still continue to be a sorcerer because he was the one with cursed energy. He even retained the massive amounts of cursed energy that Rika's spirit possessed, and the cursed Rika remained with him as a vessel despite her soul moving on to the afterlife. It's considered to be a parting gift from her, and went on to act as Yuta's external cursed technique, storing weapons and cursed energy. Following this, he was sent to train with Miguel in Africa, whom Gojo Satoru had previously fought against during the night parade of 100 demons. The boundless cursed energy Yuta had allowed him to learn several advanced cursed techniques within a mere year. How good is Yuta's control over his cursed energy? How does that affect his anatomy? Higher levels of energy are harder to control, and this has been a common theme in anime for a while. Noelle from Black Clover struggled with controlling her magic due to her having so much magical energy. During the tree climbing exercise in Naruto, Sakura was the one who displayed the best chakra manipulation, and Kakashi mentioned how she didn't have as much chakra as Sasuke or Naruto. Within Jujutsu Kaisen, the Gojo clan's limitless technique cannot be used to its fullest extent unless the wielder possesses the 6 eyes, which allows the sorcerer to see and manipulate cursed energy on a molecular level. The situation is pretty much the same with Yuta, whose reserves have been compared with that of Gojo's by Yuji and Choso alike. During the Culling Game arc, Ryu Ishigori claimed that Yuta's cursed energy levels were nearly bottomless. During Yuta's early training phase, he was taken to the cursed tool vault by Gojo and given a katana, or sword. It was done to allow Yuta to fight while channeling his cursed energy into the weapon, and the katana made it easier for him to control his cursed energy, at least to a certain extent. Of course, it wasn't super effective from the very beginning, with Yuta struggling with focusing his cursed energy on the blade and managing to make shallow cuts. He then trained with Maki for 3 months and was assigned to be part of several missions, which led to him getting better with his sword as well as his cursed energy manipulation. After becoming a more seasoned fighter following his training with Miguel, Yuta continued to use a katana, not because he needed it to focus his energy, but because it had just become a weapon of choice for him. His nigh bottomless reserves also caused an overflow of cursed energy on his katana at times, causing them to break as a result. This would require Yuta to replace his katanas as his mode of fighting had evolved to swordplay reinforced with cursed energy, or jujutsu. He had become so good that he learned how to use reverse curse technique, or RCT, within a year. The technique in itself is very complicated, with someone like Gojo having struggled with it for a very long time. During the Hidden Inventory arc, we witnessed Shoko Iri explaining the process to him, but when Gojo and Geto failed to get it, she jokingly mentioned how they didn't have sense or talent. What makes it so complicated is the science behind it. Cursed energy is negative, so it runs on minus. Let's take -1 as the reference point. Adding more cursed energy to -1 causes it to become -2, -3, and so on. However, for reversed cursed technique to work, cursed energy has to be multiplied with cursed energy, thus creating +1 or a positive. This makes reversed cursed technique necessary for healing and allows curses to regenerate their severed body parts. Because Shoko Iri is proficient with reversed cursed technique, she works as a doctor and can regenerate limbs if she works on her patients sooner. Gojo's attack, known as Cursed Technique Reversal Red, requires him to multiply cursed energy with cursed energy to create a repelling effect that blasts his opponents away. He initially couldn't pull it it off, even with Limitless and Six Eyes. It wasn't until he almost died in his fight against Toji Fushiguro that he figured out how to do it by tapping into the core of his cursed energy. On the other hand, Yuta managed to learn it within a year and went on to become proficient with it. And unlike Gojo, who can only use it on himself, Yuta can use it on himself and on others to heal them. For example, during the Culling Game arc, Yuta felt responsible for handling Kenjaku's game all on his own, as he could not be present during the disaster at Shibuya. Because he was doing the lion's share of the work, he was prone to getting hit by several powerful attacks, which he countered by constantly healing himself using RCT. This led to him becoming highly exhausted, however, because he didn't have a move similar to Gojo's, whose Six Eyes and Limitless worked together to make his cursed energy usage ridiculously minimal. At the end of the Itadori extermination arc, Yuta stopped Yuji's heart as he had faked his promise to the higher-ups that he would kill Yuji for being Sukuna's vessel. Of course, Yuta didn't wish to kill Yuji, but he had to do so due to the binding vow. When Yuta did stop Yuji's heart, temporarily killing him, he simultaneously used his RCT in him to prevent a permanent death, which not only saved Yuji, but also allowed him to craftily work with and against the binding vow. He then went on to heal the injuries of Naoya Zenin, who had been poisoned by Choso's blood after the two had fought one another. Apart from using RCT to heal, Yuta can also apply it in a manner similar to Gojo's curse technique Reversal Red, which he did during his fight against Kurorushi in the Culling Game arc. He used a blast of positive energy to damage the body of the cursed spirit. Is Yuta as physically strong as Yuji? Yuji Itadori, with or without cursed energy, has always had an absurd amount of physical strength. That's always been his entire shtick. Yuta, on the other hand, isn't built the same way, at least physically. However, this doesn't mean that you either have to be built differently like Yuji or be born with a heavenly restriction like Toji and Maki to be insanely physically strong. Every sorcerer uses cursed energy to amp their bodies, thus increasing their own physical strength. Otherwise, even a strong sorcerer would take severe damage from a hard fall. It's the amount of cursed energy one possesses that determines how much the person can amp their physical strength. This is what makes Gojo and Todo so physically strong. Yuta, with his insane reserves, can do the same and compensate for his otherwise weaker build. The fight against Geto that led to Yuta unleashing all of Rika's cursed energy played a big role in fine-tuning Yuta's senses, as well as increasing his ability to amp himself up with cursed energy. Combined with his swordplay and hand-to-hand combat, Yuta is able to make himself as physically strong as Yuji, if not more. His blows can crush his opponents in a single move, which he has displayed while fighting Itadori. Yuta was able to knock him far back with a front kick to his chest. He also managed to knock Choso out with a backhand. During one instance, Yuji punched a car at Yuta, and using cursed energy reinforcement, Yuta threw it back at him. When he was tailing Yuji, both sides were surprised by each other's speed. In conclusion, Yuta can match Yuji when it comes to physical stats after reinforcing cursed energy. However, unlike Gojo, Yuta's technique can tire him out and drain him of his cursed energy. It's not as though his massive reserves, which are allegedly higher than Gojo's, will help him, because he also utilizes extreme amounts of said energy. This is where Yuta's katana comes into play, making it even harder for Yuji to read Yuta as he emits cursed energy not just from his body, but also his sword, mirroring Yuji's level of speed, strength, and agility while being able to heal himself constantly. His moveset is ridiculously versatile, to say the least. We see it in greater motion during the Culling Game. When Yuta fought Ryu Ishigori and Takako Uro, Yuta did it entirely barehanded, as he didn't wish to reveal his complete moveset to his opponents. One of his punches at Ryu Ishigori created a large crater on the ground due to the impact of his swing, all while Ishigori was defending himself with cursed energy. He was also able to close the distance across the Sendai colony as he ran at high speed, performing moves similar to parkour, much like Yuji often does. This allowed him to avoid Ishigori's beams. When he fought the cursed spirit Kurorushi, Yuta ripped a steel railing from the road and threw it at the cockroach curse, overpowering him across multiple instances. He even defended against blast waves while his continued self-healing prevented him from getting long-term injuries, making Yuta a special grade user of curse technique with physical strength comparable to that of Yuji, Kenjaku, Sukuna, all while having a fantastic defense with RCT that prevents him from taking anything beyond minimal damage. In short, he's a tank. Why Yuta's cursed technique is the most dangerous CT in the story. For starters, Yuta's cursed energy in itself has an ominous effect to it. While Gojo has his godlike vibe going on, Yuta's energy is more malevolent and unsettling, which had struck Maki, Panda, and Toge when they first met him. It made Choso, Yuji, and Naoya uncomfortable as well when Yuta arrived to execute Yuji. Choso was quick to ask Yuji to run for his life, as he could tell that Yuta's strength was overwhelming, like Gojo's, which meant that fighting him would mean death for Yuji. While While he is versatile when it comes to melee combat, Yuta takes things to a whole new level with his curse technique of copy or mimicry. Generally, curse techniques manifested in sorcerers stem from their bloodlines and are engraved into their brains. Because Yuta can copy innate techniques, he has several techniques engraved into his brain alongside his ability to copy. One of his earliest copied techniques would be the cursed speech of the Inumaki clan, which he replicated from Toge. During his first time performing it, he used a microphone summoned by Rika, which had the symbol of the fangs and the snake eyes of the Inumaki clan. He spoke through the microphone after Geto unleashed several lower-grade curses and commanded them to die at once. In the case of Inumaki, the sorcerer always speaks in onigiri ingredients, as anything he says would be a form of cursed speech. He will also take damage if he's trying to use powerful commands against opponents stronger than him. Yuta doesn't have this issue, however, as his status as a special grade with his incredible reserves makes him a cut above the rest in strength. He also doesn't have to speak in onigiri ingredients or any other alternatives, as he can switch on his copy techniques instead of them constantly being part of. He doesn't use the microphone to use cursed speech anymore, and instead prefers to use the ring that he had received from Rika. It allows him to connect to her vessel and manifest the symbol of the Inumaki clan on his tongue, after which he uses cursed speech. Quite recently, he used it in battle against Sukuna, as he asked him not to move before he used his slashing attack known as Thin Ice Breaker. During the Culling Game arc, Yuta copied a lot of techniques, such as Dhruv Lakdawala's Shikigami. Using his hair as an intermediary, Yuta causes small bats with heads like that of Rika to appear. It encapsulates Yuta's opponents in a sphere, kind of like Megumi's rabbits. It also creates something like a domain that slashes Yuta's victims once they're inside the sphere. From Takako, he copied the technique of controlling the sky, which he referred to as sky manipulation. This allows Yuta to turn the sky into a tangible surface, which is then used to manipulate space. He can hit the surface of the sky like Takako and send his target flying without having to hit the target. If the opponent is standing in front of Yuta, he can hit the sky or the space behind that person, and the impact from the hit will send the opponent flying, regardless of their defenses. The refined version of this, which Yuta can pull off, is known as Thin Ice Breaker. It blasts the opponent away with a huge concussive force. He used it against Ryu Ishigori, making the latter spit up blood. Used it against Sukuna as well, while Yuta had his domain generate. After using cursed speech to prevent Sukuna from moving, Yuta used Thin Ice Breaker with his katana and cursed energy to break through Sukuna's defenses and wounded the left side of his face. It was done while Yuji and Yuta were attempting to aim for the barrier between Sukuna's and Megumi's souls so as to decrease Sukuna's hold on him. Sukuna being weakened following his fight with Gojo also worked out for Yuta. Yuta can perform maximum output Jacob's Ladder, which he has replicated from the symbiotic Heian era sorcerer known as Angel. This technique causes a pillar of light to blast down onto a target from above. Whatever technique the light touches, it extinguishes it. It nullifies Jujutsu, and is currently being used in the barrier of Yuta's domain expansion against Sukuna so that the connection between the King of Curses and the body of Megumi Fushiguro can be weakened now that Sukuna is using Megumi as his vessel instead of Yuji. Yuta's G Warstaff, or Ink, has been copied from Charles Bernard, who was forced to participate in the Culling Game arc. As an aspiring mangaka, Bernard's technique allows him to see the future of his target by attaching a manga panel to them and then drawing blood from them. This is quite similar to clairvoyance. While Bernard uses a pen-like spear as his cursed tool of choice to fulfill the necessary conditions, Yuta uses his katana and gets to see his opponent's future movements. Of course, it's one of the many copy techniques he's used against Sukuna in chapter 250. But finally, we have the most interesting of all, and that is Shrine. This technique replicates Sukuna's cleave, which generates invisible slashes that cut enemies apart. After using ink on the curse, Sukuna began to wonder if Yuta would use Limitless and play all his cards. However, with Yuta not having 6 eyes, it wouldn't be possible. However, Yuta had something more interesting in store, making Sukuna grab the katana that held his technique, after which he activated Cleave. Needless to say, the curse was shocked after being bitten by his own fangs. It's not like Yuta can use these techniques whenever, wherever. He's been using them consecutively against Sukuna at this moment because he, Yuji, and Sukuna are inside Yuta's domain. Outside the domain, however, Yuta has to maintain his connection with Rika after summoning her to use these techniques. There is also a time limit for how long he can sustain his connection. Akutami probably added this element to nerf him by a bit, thus increasing the stakes for combat. Otherwise, Yuta would be way too overpowered. With Yuta's skill, it's no surprise that he has achieved the pinnacle of sorcery with his domain expansion. Due to his power stemming as a result of his mutual love with Rika, his domain is known as Authentic Mutual Love. It's a field encircled by ropes across cross-like structures that are tied together to symbolize love. The entire domain is brimming with katanas, most of them being attached to the ground. Each katana contains one of the several aforementioned curse techniques that Yuta has copied. With each katana he picks up, he can activate the cursed technique within it without having to deal with any time restrictions. The only drawback would be Yuta himself being oblivious to which katana possesses which technique until he picks the sword up. While domains have the sure hit feature, Yuta's delicate and sophisticated technique allowed him to narrow the sure hit down to only Sukuna, which prevented Itadori from catching any of Yuta's attacks. Sukuna himself acknowledged the scale of the technique and wondered whether Yuta was always capable of something like this. Despite his powers, however, in a battle of domains, Sukuna is more likely to win, and we'll explain why in the next segment. Has Yuta surpassed Gojo? Despite being a special grade sorcerer and someone Gojo expects to be surpassed by, Yuta is yet to surpass Gojo. This is addressed several times during his fight against Sukuna. Yuta does have a few advantages over Gojo. He has higher levels of cursed energy, and techniques like Jacob's Ladder can nullify infinity. If it's immediately followed by Thin Ice Breaker, Yuta can land a concussive hit on the Six Eyes user. He can even map out his attacks after seeing the future with ink, but the entire procession would require time, his connection to Rika, and his usage of a high amount of cursed energy. On the other hand, Gojo's Six Eyes and Limitless make his cursed energy usage almost negligible. He doesn't get drained off of it like Yuta or any other sorcerer. Also, he's not going to give Yuta the time to land all those attacks. Yuta can pull it off if the act takes place within his domain, but Gojo will defeat Yuta in a battle of domains. When Yuta and Sukuna fight, Sukuna mentions time and time again that he's at a disadvantage because his fight with Gojo has just ended. He can't expand his domain to create the malevolent shrine at that moment. His RCT is temporarily sluggish as well. He's been drained of his cursed energy and, as a result, claims that his current cursed energy reserves are on the same level as Yuta's. Sukuna has had a devastating battle with Gojo while he was at his full power, so he compares his weakened state with Yuta's, which already tells us that Gojo is stronger. After getting hit with Thin Icebreaker, Sukuna talks about how he needs to make direct contact with Yuta to land a fatal attack, similar to what he had to do with Gojo. But he also mentions that even together, Yuta and Yuji do not surpass Gojo, which makes the gap between Gojo and Yuta much more than marginal. Not long after, Yuta goes on to say that Sukuna would have annihilated him and Yuji in an instant had he not been weakened after fighting Gojo. If Prime Yuta and Prime Gojo go against one another, Yuta will constantly have to maintain his defense while using attacks that drain him of massive amounts of cursed energy. The ordeal would be way too tiring, whereas Gojo's defensive infinity is automatic and he doesn't run out of cursed energy. This battle would have to end with Gojo winning mid-difficulty. Marvelous verdict! And with that, today's video comes to an end. What do you think about Yuta? Did you enjoy today's video? If so, don't forget to like and let us know your favorite part down below. Until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.